Miles Rote, welcome to the Uncivilized podcast. This is truly a pleasure. For people who don't know, Miles and I have spent a number of hours together on the beaches of Costa Rica, hanging out in where was it in Barcelona
Yeah,
in Europe. Like we,
yeah.
we just kind of bounce all over the world together. We don't really know each other, but so I thought we'd use this podcast episode as a way. Welcome, brother. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I think we've hung in 3 different countries, and now we get to do it virtually.
And we've only hung in the U.S. this year, huh?
I don't even think we hung in the
Oh, we
U.S. It
haven't
was
hung in the
BC,
U.S. That's right. Canada, Costa Rica, Spain. Yeah.
Spain. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thanks for joining. For people who don't know you, would you mind telling us a little bit? You're based out of Costa Rica, and I know it's an American question, but like, what do you do? And is there anything right now that's inspiring you?
I like that question. I live in Costa Rica. I live in Nosara, Costa Rica. I was splitting my time between here and Austin, but I've made this place full time. I know you've been out here enough to know how special this place is, especially if I'm going to be working from my computer. The idea that I can have my feet in the sand and be in the jungle, but then be at a computer all day makes it work where I feel
Yeah.
energized to be on my computer, which otherwise is difficult to do. But I am the co-founder of Author Inc., author.inc. So the idea is we're bringing entrepreneurship and authorship together.
Hmm.
Traditionally, you see the writing industry focus on different elements, especially just selling copies. But the truth is, a lot of books don't sell copies. And there is more power actually than what a nonfiction book will bring to a thought leader, an expert, a business professional, a coach, a consultant. More opportunities will come from that than, say, book sales. And so, how can we help create the best book possible, but also help you launch a book that strikes that and focuses more on that than maybe making $5 a copy? You can make $5,000 a service. So,
Yeah.
we really focus on that, and we take a very different way of doing it. But yeah, it's been super exciting. And then as far as what I'm excited right now, I guess I gotta say it's got to be AI. Like, I just am so excited about where things are going now. I will say there's a caveat to that, right? I am scared shitless. I think
Mm.
that it can do more harm than good. I
Yeah.
think that we are standing over like a precipice that we have no idea like what comes next or where we're going
Yeah.
and what happens when we jump off this cliff. But I'm here on the tip of the spear for it because you can't put the toothpaste back in the bottle. So
Yeah.
might as well ride this thing out and learn as much as I can and try to enhance myself, my knowledge, and my impact more than maybe trying to be afraid of how it's going to replace me.
I love it. There were two things that I wanted to talk to you about specifically were sort of your path to getting where you are and then AI, because I think your path is fascinating. And I know that like we're both AI dorks. You're a little bit of a superior AI dork. And I hope like 2 years from now, you and I aren't like on a strawberry farm picking strawberries for our robot overlords. And I'll be like, remember the fucking interview? Remember when you said you were excited about AI? Let's dive in if you don't mind sharing, Miles, because I don't think you've had a straight line career trajectory. Got out of high school and we're like, you know what I want to do? I want to work for a company that writes books for entrepreneurs. And that's just what you've done for the last 15 years. Would you mind sharing with the audience? And the reason I'm asking you this, because I do know, is so many people listening to this podcast, brother, are in transition
Hmm.
or even worse, are fighting transition because they think, oh God, what a waste of time. I was an attorney for 8 years. I didn't like it, but how can I now move into creative writing and give up all of that lawyerism that I used and the
Hmm.
money I spent to law school and yada yada. So let's hear a little bit of the Miles Rote CV, if you wouldn't mind
Yeah.
sharing.
Yeah, well, I first of all, I love transitions, and I think transitions are magical. And I think that, oftentimes we will tie our identity to what we are doing professionally. And I think that's where transitions can become very difficult. And we can maybe circle back on that later because, you aren't the thing that you're doing. And the more you realize that, the easier transitions can be. So I actually look for transitions. I think if I'm not transitioning enough, there's almost something wrong, right? And
Mm.
that isn't something that I came to naturally, per se. That is something that I have learned, call it the hard way. So, yeah, I graduated high school. I actually graduated on a Friday and I started Marine Corps boot camp on a Monday. So I went right into it, which was super intense, but
Yeah.
incredible.
So you're 18.
I was 18. Yeah. I was fresh, and I was in this program. I was in the reserves, and I was in this program where I wouldn't miss any college. So as soon as I graduated from boot camp, I started college. So I graduated boot camp on a Friday, started college on a Monday.
Wow.
2 weeks later, September 11th happened, and roughly, and I was like, holy shit. Okay, here we go. I didn't
Mhm.
expect this. I joined, of course, for the challenge to, of course, serve the country. I wanted to become in the FBI and CIA. So this was a natural part of that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go to college and I needed to fund it. So, long story short, with that, I ended up the next year tearing my ACL and separating my shoulder in a football injury. And
Okay.
that was 2 months before we got activated. Uh, they tried to deploy me, or rather, I tried to get deployed because the injuries in my eyes weren't that bad. But because I didn't have surgery on my knee, they wouldn't let me go. So everyone else went but me. Well, not everyone, some others couldn't go. But I had to go back to my university after I was activated, after I said goodbye to everyone that I was going to war. I had to basically say I couldn't go. And that was definitely the hardest part of my life. And talk about
Mm,
like identity and transitions with that. I also couldn't go to college because too much time had passed because I was in the activation process. So I couldn't go to college. I had lost my job because you had to be a student to work the job that I had. So everything that I had sort of started to create my identity around as being a Marine, as someone in university, it all went to the wayside. And it was a very difficult time in my life where I had to do a lot of reflection.
yeah.
So fast forward, I graduate college. I'm not sure quite what I want to do, but I still want to.
Miles, can I hold you there for a sec?
Please.
How do you reflect at 19 or however old you were? That feels like a time, especially for young men, when like you don't reflect. You
Mm,
drink, you fight, you
mm.
fuck, you smoke dope, you get arrested, you steal cars, you what part of you became active that allowed you to be more mature than say probably most 19-year-olds in your situation, if you can put a name to it.
For sure, it's a really good question. So I grew up in a very difficult childhood, you could say. My father was in jail a lot of my life, different relatives. They were selling drugs out of our house. Part of the reason why I had, which we'll get to, but part of this reason that I had this idea that I had to become a police officer, FBI agent, CIA, something like that, is that I wanted to be one of the good guys. And so I
Mm,
actually never did any drugs. I did drink alcohol, so a drug technically, right? But I never did drugs. And so I had this thing inside of me that I had to be one of the good guys. And that was like my anchor that I had.
okay.
So even through that, I wouldn't allow myself to go off the deep end, or not even allow myself. I didn't even have the programming to do it because such at
Mm,
an early age, I had programmed, I guess, myself, call it subconsciously, where I was not going to go down that route. So
wow.
it felt pretty easy in that sense.
Okay.
However, I had never experienced the stress and the anxiety
Yeah.
from the trauma. This sounds silly, but I got what they call trench mouth. And trench mouth, you get when you're in the war trenches because you were so stressed out. You develop this mouth infection. I got that about a month after going back to Flagstaff, where I was living at the time. Everyone else had been deployed, and I had trench mouth because I had such anxiety
Wow.
around not going to war
Whew.
and everyone else going. So it definitely impacted me in a
Okay.
very it attacked my ego, I would say, more than
Mm,
anything else, because I
yeah.
felt like not man enough because I couldn't go, even though
Yeah.
I wanted to, in air quotes, wanted to. I don't think
Mhm.
anyone really wants to necessarily do that. Of course, you want to support your country, but so yeah, it was a difficult time, but I had those anchor points. And I would say the things that got me through it were writing, learning, philosophy at the time, actually, which I just discovered. I had never learned anything about that in the environment that I had grown up with,
Yeah.
and hip hop. I would say would be the last thing.
No
Hip
kidding.
hop. Yeah, sure. Yeah, like it's
Hip hop
just
for
like
music, hip hop
yeah,
dancing.
hip hop music. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So
Wow. Thanks for
so
sharing that. You're very, I don't want to say fortunate, but you know from law enforcement that it's an easy slope to go right and very few people go left. Growing up in the house that you did, and then the very first sort of inciting incident, a lot of kids are like, "All right, now I'm a criminal. You know, this is what I was raised to be." Man, you had some strength in your constitution, no matter what the house you grew up in.
yeah, and it's one of those things that you can look back on and almost be fortunate for those
Mhm.
circumstances, given that
Mhm.
it helped refine my character in that sense to be more resilient.
Yeah. So sorry, carry on. I'd love to come back to your family stuff in a second. So you go back to college. You can't go to college because you're not working. How did this sort of sort itself out?
I waited for the next semester, joined the next semester, took out a
Gotcha.
loan basically to cover things, got a job, a different job, so on and so forth. Went through university, graduated. I ended up getting medically discharged from the Marines due to so many injuries,
Mm,
which I guess brings us to, well, not quite. So I graduate and then I become a police officer. And I did that. I went through the training. About midway through the training, I knew that it wasn't for me. But because I had this long term goal of being in the FBI and CIA, I
yeah.
knew it was something that I sort of had to do. I had to check that box. There are other ways to get in, but that was like the route that I saw. But I just knew it wasn't for me. But I was like head of my class and I was succeeding. I was doing well. So everyone convinced me to stay. And I had conversations about, with my peers and even instructors about kind of walking away. But
Mm,
I finished top of my class, and it was a really challenging but wonderful experience. But several months into it, I I quit. I put in my resignation. One of the hardest things I've ever done, and there were two big reasons. One, I felt that it was negatively impacting my constitution, to use the word
mm,
that you used earlier. You basically, as a police officer, for better or for worse, you have to assume the worst in every situation. So if you pull a
mm,
car over, you have to assume that they're going to shoot you or they have
mm,
guns and everything else.
mhm,
It's a survival. Like you must do that. But I felt myself change where, say, my girlfriend didn't answer the call or my phone call, I assumed the worst. Like I could see and feel myself starting to change, and it did not feel good. The
mm,
second was I found myself, you're in these situations where you are arresting people for things that maybe you have done or don't think that there aren't necessarily things wrong with that where you should be putting someone behind bars.
yeah.
Now, again, like it's important, it's an important job. I highly respect the job, but I just couldn't. I felt myself losing myself a bit
Mm,
and crossing lines in the sand that I didn't think I would ever have to cross. And
mm,
it didn't feel good. And I knew that I wouldn't be better for it. Combining that with, now to get into the other aspect of the pain, and part of the reason why I was medically discharged, I had chronic pain from sixth grade to age 32. And sitting
man.
in a car all day as a police officer with a gun belt, even the pain on top of everything else got to be where my legs were getting numb every day.
Wow.
It was
Yeah.
so uncomfortable. And so I knew I couldn't continue. It was one of the hardest decisions I ever made. I had no idea what I was going to do afterwards, but I marched in there one day, um, feeling like I had kind of gone against my conscience of doing some of the things as a police officer that you have to do.
Yeah.
And I put in my resignation, and that was that.
Wow. What was that afternoon like, or what was the next morning like?
it it was freedom in the sense of I
Mm,
knew that I had made a choice that ultimately I had to make, but I didn't know if I would have the strength to do. So
mm,
it was freedom in that sense.
mhm,
Um, and honestly, again, when you talk about transitions, it was one of those things where I didn't know what was next, but I
yeah.
knew that the identity that I was, not even identity, I knew that the life that I was forming for myself, regardless of identity that I tied into being a police officer, was the right thing for me.
Yeah. did that give up on CIA, FBI, all of it?
No, so then I started to find like carve out my new track for that. So then I became an officer of the court. So I've always been like an entrepreneur. So started my own process serving company where you
Mm.
basically, you've been served and you serve
Yeah.
legal documents. I started that and was doing that for a couple of years. And then I became a private investigator and did that for a few years. Really enjoyed both of those things for different reasons. But that would give me basically the 3 years that I needed to then be able to go apply for FBI and CIA.
Okay.
And right as I was getting close to that mark, it was another one of those times where I realized that is FBI CIA right for me? Maybe it was this idea that I had implanted in my mind because of my childhood, because of
Mm-hmm.
how I was raised, for
Mm-hmm.
better or for worse, that that was more of something that I told myself I would do or I should do, but is it actually something that I want to do? And
Yeah.
it's hard to be able to figure out the difference between those things, right?
Yeah.
Because it could be a template that curates me in a great way, but not something I necessarily want to follow forever. And
Mm.
when I actually healed my chronic pain when I was 32, that forced me to understand how much of my life was really impacted and guided by my pain, that I was able to realize too how much of my career, how much of my life had been controlled by the circumstances when I was a kid. And it was
Yeah.
this way for me to zoom all the way out and say, okay, what if I put all of that aside? Like, if I could just start over, what would that
Mm-hmm.
look like to have a new life, a new career?
Mm.
What would I want to do? What would that look like? And that's when I started to change my career trajectory
Yeah.
entirely.
That's so big, man. I mean, first of all, thanks for sharing the whole story. It's I'm fascinated by people's stories. It's one of the reasons I have this podcast. It's one of the reasons I love humans. And I asked the guys in the nation the other day, we did a call on identity. One of the questions was, if you woke up tomorrow, sort of the classic or a classic coaching question, and you had no memory of your past, what do you think how would you recreate yourself and in what way?
Mm,
And it's so interesting how a lot of people would go a completely different direction than they're going now. But it's a thought experiment on a 1 hour call on a Tuesday morning, where for you, it was like, no, 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 this is reality. This isn't, you don't get to sign off the call and then go back to your job and your career and your goals and your dreams and your, laid out plan. It sounds like what was ahead of you was nothingness, right? Is that fair to say? Like, or it was just the unknown.
totally, totally.
How did you deal with the scope and size of that unknown? And you're sorry, just to pin you, you're 32 years old at the time. How
32
old?
when I healed my chronic pain, and then that was for me the sign of, yeah, and maybe after like 90 days of that, post healing the pain, it was that
Yeah.
awakening, you could say, of
Okay.
the future doesn't have to be a template of the past.
Okay. Whew, it's such a biggie, man. I don't know. Do we want to go down the wormhole of how you did heal your chronic pain? I feel like that's a big thing to sort of leave as an open chapter in the conversation, but I also don't want it to be a conversation about the whole thing to be about healing. You want to just mention a couple things that you did for that?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Basically, it was misdiagnosed where I had a herniated disc from sixth grade from high jump. I was told it was a pinched nerve. It was very hard to see from different MRIs. Plus, no one thought I would have a herniated disc that early.
Mm,
Finally found this machine. If anyone does have a herniated disc, the DRX 9000 machine with the chiropractor will change your life. Most of the time, you can't get rid of a herniated disc. So, very fortunate to have stumbled upon that, and very fateful the way it all happened, which we don't have to get into, but incredible how it happened. But after that, yeah, even your question that you asked to your group, it's tough to answer that because you with no memory of yesterday, but of course anything that you say is totally based on everything that happened yesterday and the day before and
sure.
your whole life. And it's one of those things where I don't think we have much of a free will. I think that we can
Mm,
carve out space for agency. It's hard to
mm,
say that you have free will, but I think that we do have free will not. So you can have the choice maybe not to control your life, but you
mm,
have these moments where you can say no to something, where you have
yeah.
control to not do something. And sometimes that is more powerful than creating something or trying to do something specific. So for me, that was the biggest thing. It was the choice to not do what I had always done and to think through the same lens. And now it was a matter of curating, knowing that it would take a lot of time, new lenses and perspectives that then I could use to
Mm.
generate a life that maybe was more from a sense of agency that I'm creating now as this adult, free from those, free from that pain, that trauma, you could say,
Yeah.
and sketch it forward versus trying to continuously refine the same pattern over and over again, even trying to do it in new ways.
Mm. Miles, what was step one? Like, was it you sitting down with a notebook? Was it like going on Pinterest? Was it, asking your, like, reading, what's that damn book? What color is your parachute? Or,
Yeah.
asking five friends, what do you think my strengths and weaknesses are? Like, what was step one for you, man?
Yeah, I mean, reading was a big part of it.
Okay.
Writing was a big part of it. But I
Mm.
would say more than both of those was yoga at that time,
No
because I was
shit.
able to go transform from a place of hating my body and call it,
Mm.
and maybe even hating myself a bit because of the pain,
Yeah.
to get going very deep. I became a yoga teacher. I did many different trainings, a lot of different retreats, and being able to, and meditating, being able to sit with myself and get attuned to my body was definitely the first step.
Mm.
I'm
Okay.
not saying that's a first step for everyone, but
Right.
given my history with my body, that was absolutely the best step for me. And then
Okay.
plant medicines was another big one for me. And those things coming together around the same time, one thing that I realized that I was doing is I had been shallow breathing my entire life in this state of fight or flight because
Mm.
of that pain, even, that I was able to realize that by being calm, by breathing deeply, by meditating, by being with my body, that created a whole new default
Mm.
system in my body that then I was able to start to operate from that.
Okay. And then let's take it just a little bit more granularly. What was Miles 2.0 after? It feels like the transition time was probably filled with yoga, plant medicine, a lot of introspection, a lot of soul searching, or deep time with yourself. What was like action step number one after that?
Moving
Like
to Costa
apply for a
Rica the
job?
first time. Yeah, moving to
Really?
Costa
Going to
Rica.
Costa Rica?
Yeah.
No
So
kidding.
this was around the time of Tim Ferriss with the 4 Hour Work Week. And it was
Gotcha.
one of those things where I realized that, holy shit, you can work from your computer and live anywhere. Like, we're living in that time.
Hmm.
And what an incredible thing that no other generation has really been able to do.
Yeah.
I'm not thinking that maybe I'll do this forever, but what can I learn to be able to, as a new skill set, because it was kind of emerging, to be able to go and live in a place that I've always wanted to live and work from my computer. So I really started to learn digital marketing,
Mm.
whether that was building websites, doing social, creating ads, and working with different folks to essentially help them do those things. Again, as an entrepreneur, having done some of those things in some ways before, how can I take that to the next level and make the jump? And so I learned everything that I could as I was still a private investigator, basically doing surveillance on different people. And then at the same time, just listening to podcasts and building websites and getting good enough where I feel like I can make the jump, made the jump, moved to Costa Rica, and started to do that, just freelancing until I started to work for a startup.
Okay. Did that sort of solidify, this is the way I want to live from that point forward? Where maybe you're not, you said like, I may not be in digital marketing, I may not be doing people's socials, but did it solidify like a pattern or a paradigm of, you give me a laptop and a cell phone, and I can work? Was that a part for you? Because law enforcement, government work, like, it is not that.
No,
It is the
no.
opposite of that.
I think it really good question. I think it solidified the fact that I could actually just recreate my life
Mm,
on my own terms, and that I could leave all of that behind, that I could
mm,
form, I don't even want to say a new identity, but carve out a new life and
yeah,
do well at it. And that was the thing that was a takeaway for me. I don't have to be beholden to these old patterns, and I
yeah.
can rewrite my life and be able to create a life that I want instead of one that I was maybe given.
Yeah.
And the more I was able to do it, the more confidence that I would get in that. And then the more I was able to see how I could continue to do that. So I actually didn't feel myself getting so caught up in this idea that I was like a digital nomad. I didn't
Mm,
care. It was, wow, I can do this. What else can I do?
okay. I'm going to ask you this just because I'm a writer too. How much of your how do I phrase this? You had crafted stories, written stories, created stories, written for most of your life. How much of that skill set was then transposed onto lifestyle design or recreation of not the new identity, but the path for the identity to walk? How much did you lean into your literary skill set for this?
Yeah, I would say that for me, in order to think best, I have to write. And I think the more I'm able to write, the more I'm able to refine my ideas, clarify my thinking, and figure out what it is underneath my consciousness to see what's in the subconscious, what's in the unconscious,
Mm,
understand those things. And again, I really don't think we have much control over our life, but
mm,
if we understand how much of our unconscious and subconscious is controlling us, then being able to design the unconscious and subconscious, knowing it's designing us back, can be
mm,
one of the most powerful things. And so I started to see that even from my writing, things that I was learning. So it wasn't so much as far as literary, where I was like writing to become a great writer, as much as it was how can
mm,
I write to understand what it is, the things that are hiding from me, so I can
mm.
better put it out there. And then better understand how to design the things that I want into those subconscious things to get to where I want to go.
Beautiful, man. I'm curious about the direction we go here because I want to ask you about AI and I want to ask you about how AI is probably going to squish the skill set of writing for a lot of people. And if you're open to it, I would also love to hear about the family, like your family blossoming, let's call it, that's happened in the last couple of years. Do you think we should go AI here or should we go family here?
Yeah, let's jump into the AI because I think it's a
Okay.
good segue with
Yeah.
even wanting to be on the tip of the spear and understanding that you could be a digital nomad and work from anywhere with a computer. For me, I really started to understand the power of technology being exponential and where all of this was going. And the
Mm,
more I got involved with it, the more clear it was. And I became, call it obsessed with the idea of the fact that in 10 years and 15 and 20 years, like the whole world is going to look completely different. And how we interface with ourselves, with each other, with information is going to be different. So I stayed very engaged in that. And
mm,
throughout that process, my career has like match that in some way. And so, yeah, with AI, it's it's such a buzzword now, and
sure.
everyone's thinking about it and talking about it. I just think that it's one of those things that if you can figure out ways to leverage it to make yourself more aligned with yourself and the world, these tools can be used to help you be more human, not less. And I think
Yeah.
that everyone is looking at technology and social media and using it in ways that make them feel less human. But again, I am living in the jungle. I am eating fruit locally. I am like eating local meat. I feel more aligned with like being a human than I ever did in Austin,
Right.
but I'm using AI and technology in order to do that, right? So it's enabling me to do that. And I'm
Yeah.
also able to learn so much more about myself and the world because of AI. And in that sense, even kind of be more human. So it's a slippery slope. And I
Yeah.
think that with the algorithms, most of us can get taken away and targeted and kind of used and manipulated by technology instead of using it,
Yeah.
but it's here to stay. And if we can master these tools, then I think we're better off for it. There's a whole segue too of this idea that, and I'm not necessarily one to believe it, but humans are the sex organs of technology. Marshall McLuhan said that, right? And I think about it in like this different way where I think, call it, there was the Big Bang, and then eventually gravity started to form, and then eventually there was more organizations where planetary systems started to form, and then more organization where there was the right separation between the earth and the sun and the moon such that life could start, and then it became more organized, become multicellular, and then it would become more organized. So then instead of just having a certain expiration date,
Hmm.
to dissolving into chaos, it would find more energy sources and seek that out so it could extend its lifespan, so on and so forth, all the way to humans becoming more and more organized to extend our lives to 100 years, to
Hmm.
then creating more and more tools to become more organized, to then creating things like AI that are
Hmm.
hyper organized for all of these things. And so you
Yeah.
can see this force that has taken place throughout the universe. And I think it's just fascinating. And I think that we're a part of that. And so I see technology through that lens. And in that lens, it's fascinating to help me become more human and
Hmm.
see all of this unfold versus this thing like, oh my gosh, we can't be doing this thing. This is awful. It's
Yeah.
inevitable.
But do you think I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate because I used to write like take 4 or 5 days out of a work week and write an email sequence for sales. And by having to do that, it kept me writing, it kept me thinking, it was good storytelling. I mean, I think the fucking email things were brilliant. And now I don't do that. Now I have ChatGPT write it and I edit it, and it takes me an hour of what used to take me, 4 or 5 straight days. And I'm wondering if I'm less good of a writer than I was 3 years ago. Now I'm also wondering, I think the flip side of that is I can go to jujitsu more because I'm not sitting at my desk writing emails that can now be written in an hour. And so I'm curious what you think about, like, yes, you're eating fresh fruit, you get to go to the beach, you get to be more human, but did time under tension and reps under reps under reps allow you to have mastery at a thing that is no longer necessary to have mastery at? And what is the downstream effect of that? I know I'm asking you a sort of oddly formed philosophical question, but do
No.
you see, because, and here, maybe here, let me say this too, like one of the reasons I have found bladesmithing is like I need something to be able to do when I'm done with jujitsu that still requires my hands. And even if a machine can make a knife better than I can, which it already can,
Mm.
I still want to be able to do that for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But I'm curious how much of the population is just going to go like, I don't really want to do anything. Fuck making knives, fuck writing, fuck all this stuff that I was into, because I was sort of only into it for the utility of getting the outcome I could get with it. Like my sales emails, I'm like, I don't really need to be the best in the world at writing sales emails if someone else can write them. How do you feel like we're going to balance being human because our day-to-day tasks are being taken care of with being less human because part of being human was the dedication to a task, the dedication to a path? And as the official AI human in my life, I'm taking your word as gospel. So feel free, listeners,
I,
to quote him when we're done and post all over social media.
dude, listen, I too am a worse writer and I struggle with this. However, we are in a time and place where you can become the best writer you've ever been because of AI, not a worse writer. Think about chess. The AI has replaced chess champions altogether, right? Like there are no chess champions that could beat AI. Chess is being taken to a whole new level because of AI, though, because they're able to actually train with AI and develop whole new ways of thinking about moves, the game, strategy, everything else. Now,
Mhm.
they have to willingly choose to still play chess, even though the AI overlords are better at it and learn
Yeah,
from it. But that's a choice that they make. For you with writing, maybe you're using ChatGPT to do your emails, but are you also now, because that frees up more time for you, spending more time in creative writing and diving deeper? Probably not, because you
right.
probably were writing more because you had to, and
Yeah,
that forced you to do the craft versus now choosing to do it to become better at it, become a master at it, which is very different. Now, do I think that more people will have trouble doing things out of the free will to do them versus out of a need, for sure.
Mhm.
Is that something that we're going to have to overcome and work through? Absolutely. But if it is a goal to become a very good writer and become a master of your craft in writing, you're going to do it, right? And you can find ways to leverage AI to absolutely make you better with it. So it's challenging. And
Mhm.
I think it needs to complement these things and again, not replace them.
Okay. You said at the beginning of the call, and maybe it was flippant, maybe it was half, that you're still a bit terrified of the outcome of AI or what could possibly happen negatively. I don't want you to doomsday us, but tell me a little bit of the feeling behind that.
Well, I think you're already speaking to it. And, I suffer myself from, I have like a still call it like blanketed depression fatigue from when the first like GPT-3 model came out, where I was in the mid, I was in Colombia and I was working on a book and it just deflated me entirely. And I
Mm,
have not been able to actually write since in the ways that I've wanted to. And
really?
so I've really struggled with that
Mm,
because that has been my creative output that again, I'm telling you, well, if it's important to you, you can go do it. Doing it
yeah.
is a whole other thing, right? It's it's not easy. So it's like we can say these things, but
Yeah.
it's real where it is going to take things away. But we have been replaced so many times before by technology in ways that have been very positive. Like there used
Right.
to, we could go on and on about examples. One that I like is there used to be someone in the elevator that would like, push the buttons for you and handle the elevator for you. And now this idea, before it was like absurd to think about being in the elevator alone and going up alone without an elevator operator, right?
Mm,
We have replaced so many jobs, I think, for the better, more or less. And I think AI will continue to do that. And I think that we will find ways to innovate and use our time better.
yeah.
But it gets to a point where already we've been hollowing out the middle class. And when you
Mm,
don't need the middle class, the elite has needed them for production, for
mm,
economy, for GDP, to go fight your wars. We're a lot less needed in that sense for
mm,
a lot of those things. So, what happens when drones are fighting your wars? What happens when AI algorithms and AGI basically is creating all of the input that you need and content that you need and intelligence that you need? I don't know. And I think those are the things that I get very scared about. And of course, it falling into the wrong hands. And,
right. Right.
we're in what's called a multipolar trap right now, which is everyone knows, every country knows that racing blindly ahead with AI is dangerous, but everyone is
Mm,
doing it knowing that the other country is doing it. And we
mm,
know that it's much like the race before it to develop nuclear arms. We know that the first country to get it has a massive advantage. So
right. Right.
we're in this place where we're all sort of pushing each other off of this cliff and there is no slowing down. And if people do want to follow, I think the best voice in the space to talk about how to use technology well, I would point them to Tristan Harris, who's talked about these things and recently
Right.
came out with another TED talk about it. But it's all well and good to say these things, but I really don't think that there's going to be any slowdown. And so we
Mhm.
just have to strap in.
Yeah. I'm also curious. Thank you. I agree with you. It's like, what are you going to do? And doomsdaying. I imagine there was doomsdaying at every transition throughout humanity. Like there'll be no more jobs. The internet will take them all, and the internet created infinitely more jobs. And maybe this is a new X factor. But I'm also curious. I did not get depressed when ChatGPT I realized could suddenly take over my writing. What I did was allow the fatigue of 5 years of writing sales copy to kind of hit me and be like, man, I don't want to write anything for a while. Like, oh, it's like someone can finally take this job that was relentless and endless and needed to be done. And there was this constant, okay, new thing we're selling, new 5 email series, new thing we're selling. And so I'm also really curious if some of this I felt a bit, Miles, when COVID hit, was just the collective exhaustion of like,
Mm.
wait, we don't have to drive 2 hours twice a day to a job. Like, holy shit, are we tired? And humanity kind of coming to terms with the fact that the pace it had been going energetically was unsustainable. as it is. So that's something that I've thought of. Like, will there need to be like a rest period where everybody who's been doing 80-hour weeks or 70-hour weeks and suddenly doesn't need to is like, oh shit, do I need to just lie down and take a weekend off and then find my inspiration? Then go, cool. Now what do I do? Now, is it once a week I sit down and write a creative story that I share with no one or share with an audience that isn't paying me? And so it's not tied to revenue and yada, yada, yada. It's just back to the love for the love of the game. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's that upside that we have with this, the potential of this technology, right? Is
Yeah.
we can outsource so much of the things that we're doing, and even decision making, which again can get dangerous. And I'm not saying like it's something that you just want to offload all of your decisions to ChatGPT, but you to your point, you're able to offload a lot of the things that would take up a lot of effort. And then you ask yourself, even, why was I doing those things in the first place? We can get so caught up and again put our identities, higher identities, to so
Right.
many of those things,
Right.
that when you're able to decouple your identity from tasks like
Yeah.
that, then how can you actually use your time and tie up your identity to things that feel a lot more meaningful? I mean, I think that one of the problems is we've become so far uncoupled from what it is to be human and how we evolved
Mm,
as a species, that this is an opportunity for us to return more and more back to that.
yeah.
I think if you think about evolutionary psychology and how we have always lived our lives, we couldn't really be further from that, with the food that we eat, with how um, alone we typically are, the
Right.
family systems that we have, how
Right.
sedentary we are, the work that we do, how
Right.
we use our bodies, how we use our minds,
Yeah.
love, all of these things. I think that we all feel the sense of angst, depression, anxiety because of our disconnection from that. And I think that we can, if used correctly, and I'm not saying that that will be the case, use things like AI to help us return to those things. How can we use AI to better form communities, better take time off of our, schedule so that we can spend it with our families, help us understand how to create better systems for food, for production, for poverty. The list goes on and the upsides with AI. So I see it as a way, kind of like I saw being able to work from my computer anywhere, as a way that it can help me become more human and not less. And I hope that
Mm.
it can do that for the world.
If I'm hearing you correctly, Miles, what I think you just said was AI will uncivilize us. We're
Well played.
going to stop right here. Everybody use that sound bite. Brother, do you mind? And feel free to say no to this. We can keep jamming on AI. I would love to hear or have you share, if you're open to it, a
Sure.
bit of what's happened to you with your family, specifically speaking to men.
Yeah,
Are you cool if we go there?
of course.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
What happened? Was
So
it a year and a half ago, 2 years ago?
yeah, and again, this really just ties in so well to, I think, for me, in that idea of rewriting your life and just identity and just being open to
Mm,
these different things. This was definitely a big part of all of that. So, like a lot of people, I did like 23andMe, and I did it. It's like, your genome. They have ancestry in these different ones. I did it to find ways to optimize myself. Like, what things
mm,
should I be worried about? What traits in my genes I should be concerned about? And long story short, with that, after many different updates from 23andMe, I could see that my brother, because I also did it for him as like a birthday gift,
mm,
I could see that him and I were half brothers. And that
mm,
didn't make much sense to me, because my whole life we were full brothers. My dad, who I was told was my dad, was my dad. The person that I mentioned earlier that went to prison. And as 23andMe continued to evolve, it showed that we had different paternal haplogroups, I think it's called. So he had one paternal like ancestry line, and I had a different one. And now there
mm,
was kind of no denying it. It was super clear.
mm,
And so then I had my dad also be tested with this 23andMe after he had a big health scare and almost died. And it was a way to like protect him, but I also wanted to know. and I swabbed his mouth, with his permission, and I realized that he was not my dad; he was my brother's dad, which was my suspicion, given just the family dynamic and in general.
Mm,
And so I didn't tell my dad this because I felt like it could crush him, because I feel
mm,
like my mom had not been honest with him about everything. And so maybe he had no idea that any of this was the case. So I didn't want to tell him until I even learned more. And I eventually told my brother. I eventually told my mom. It didn't go so well with my mom telling her, and she wasn't super clear about who my father was or revealing any information. So I felt kind of at a loss with it. Um, but I still kept with it, and I ended up doing the ancestry test. And it just so happened that my biological father had also done the ancestry.com test. And right away, I could see that I had a biological father and then a different half brother. And then
mm,
upon further review, I noticed through his social media account, which I found, that I also had a half sister, and I was able to get in contact with them eventually. After conversations with them, they shared it with their father and mom, and
mm.
as soon as he heard about it, he contacted me, and now we've formed a relationship, and I've met him several times, and it's been pretty incredible and
Wow.
eye-opening. And it's one of those things too, when we talk about control, you could think that, wow, I sort of like did all of these things that my traditional family didn't do, and I'm different in all of these ways, and I like carved it out with my own agency. Come
Yeah.
to find out that like my biological father, it's like, no, I'm just like doing things that he did, and things I'm taking on his attributes in a lot of ways.
Mm,
So it really always, I've always been fascinated by the nature nurture components of
yeah.
things, and it was just funny how I, upon meeting him, could see that a lot of the things that I thought I had carved out in my own personality were just a reflection of him.
So wild, man. Can we just tease a few sections of this out, and then I know we're coming up on the hour. When you first got your dad swapped, your non-bio the father that you'd lived with, and got the results back from that, and it's clear as day. He's on the right side of the page, you're on the left side, you're different. What was did that just like was it like the Tetris pieces falling into place, or was it like your body could finally relax, or you're like, I fucking knew it? Like, can you walk us through the moment you got those results?
Yeah, because it had been like 2 years of knowing that my brother and I were half brothers, I
Okay.
had over that time realized, not with 100% certainty, but close, that it was his biological father, not mine, just from even appearances,
Yeah.
demeanor, so on and so forth. Like I just knew. And
Is it a better question to ask the day you found out your brothers were, or your brother was your half brother? Was that the day that it sort of all landed?
yes, for sure.
Okay.
And
Can you
none
tell us
of it
about
made
that day?
sense. Yeah, none of it made sense. It didn't, it felt like I was, half of myself was robbed in some way, and that I
Mm,
didn't even know who I was. And the mystery of,
wow.
and this continued on too with not knowing who my father was, and going to my mom and pleading of like, hey,
Mm,
can you help me out here? And her basically just denying it, even though you couldn't deny it because it was like from three different sources and three different genetic tests. Um, Actually, more than that, because it was mine, my brother's, not my non-biological father's, then my biological father's, then my
right.
other half brother. Like it was so clear, but she continued to deny it. So it was those things coming together felt like there was a sense of not knowing who I was,
Mm,
and even I guess like having gone through all of the things that I had gone through with identity and with these rewriting your story and everything else, in some ways it felt like this new challenge and this new thing of
mm,
affirming some of those things. But it
right.
was absolutely something where I knew I wouldn't be whole until I found my father and knew
Mm,
that story and could see who I had come from. And I always, especially after the fact, of course, always felt like I never really came from my family in some ways. I mean,
yeah.
but also very close to them. And of course, I'm from them. But I always felt a bit different and
Yeah.
outcasted a bit. And so that looming as this mystery left me incomplete, and definitely finding him and cultivating a relationship felt like an opening, and much more like I could piece together
Mhm.
myself.
And you're pretty fresh into that journey, huh?
Yeah. I mean, I've only met him a handful of times. Probably only talked for 50 to 100 hours in total, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it feels very new. It feels very new to have other siblings that I didn't know
Yeah.
about that look like me and act like me, and
Yeah.
all of it's a trip. But it's a trip that gets me excited and feels like it's an opening that I get to lean into.
That's so rad, man. It also speaks a bit. I mean, we can tie this back to tech of how many people, when that stuff first came out, were like, don't do it. The government's taking your DNA. You're going to be denied or health insurance. And now there's so many stories of people's families figuring this stuff out. I imagine every like black sheep in the family that's listening to this is like, interesting. I think I'll get 23 to me. And this is a totally unfair question, but just because I love you, I'll ask it. Do you think there should be mandatory DNA testing when kids are born?
No, I don't think
Okay.
so. I will say a fun story, because I've helped write people publish books now for, I don't know, 5 years, and
Yeah.
I spoke with someone who told me a story about how she, through the same kind of thing, like a 23andMe, had found out her dad wasn't her dad, and then sought him out. And when she found him, he was like, "Wow, you're like the 15th or 20th person, I don't know, who has come to me in the last year telling me that I'm their father." And she's like, "What? Like, how is that possible?" He's like, "Well, when I was a med student, what you would do basically is get paid $25 to go donate your sperm. And basically, all of that sperm was used in different ways.
Yeah.
And now, with DNA, which they never thought probably would exist,
Right.
with all of this DNA testing, now he's like the father of 20 different children,
That's
right? So
wild.
wild.
And
So
think
I don't know.
at the time, they're like, dude, if you sign this form, no one will ever, 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 ever know. It'll be impossible for someone ever. Just go ahead, sign your
Exactly.
name right there. You
Exactly.
know?
Exactly. And this, 22-year-old kid, he's like, "Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I'll
Give me my
I'll jerk
25
off."
bucks. I
Yeah.
need beer money,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. Right. Yeah. So it's wild. But I mean, these are the times that we live in. And again,
Right.
it's just like people could just like be depressed about it, or be so excited about it, or just
Yeah.
realize that, just like how your childhood you didn't really have much control over, you didn't have any control over the past, you didn't have any control over where you were born or when you were born. What are you going to
Yeah.
do with these cards, and how are
Right.
you going to play them, and how can you make it interesting and better your life?
Yeah. I love it, man. I love your openness. I love your philosophy. I think it's a wildly exciting time. Yes, and I've done full podcast episodes, Miles, solos, of saying I think one of the biggest challenges men specifically have is our fear of the unknown
Hmm.
and our unwillingness to surrender to the unknown. Although we all kind of know we can walk out the door and get hit by a car in the next 5 minutes, and life can be, what's the famous line? We're all one phone call from our knees, or something around that. And I get it. If I look back on when I started Uncivilized 7 years ago, how radically the world has changed multiple times in just that short period. Where in my 20s, like things didn't change that much. Yeah, the internet got a little bit different and it was a little better. And now it's like the tech we used 2 years ago is obsolete, or ChatGPT wasn't on my team 2 years ago. People I interviewed didn't have like an AI assistant joining the interview. It's radically different. Uh, if you had to leave guys listening to this, given your whole story, chronic pain, job changes, career changes, identity shifts, finding out something as profound as the family shift, and I gave you the mic for a minute or two, what would you want? And speak, there's a female audience listening to this, but primarily to men. What would you say to men?
Well, first, I would say, to your point about how things have changed even over the last 20 years for yourself, and how quickly it's happened more recently. I mean, we can think about our parents' generation and how change happened for them faster than their parents and faster than their parents. And we're
Mm-hmm.
on this exponential curve that even for the next 10, it's going to be a lot more than the last 100. So
Yeah.
we have to strap in for that, right? And be ready for that. But for men specifically, I guess you mentioned how this fear of the unknown. I think that, again, we are these creatures that we haven't changed much from 250,000 years ago when we evolved into, being Homo sapiens. And we have a very good fear of the unknown that is very healthy, because to go out into the unknown means you're going to be killed by a neighboring tribe or a
Yeah.
tiger. And now, so it's great that we're programmed with that. But now we don't have to have those same fears, in the sense of it's not nearly as scary. And every time we have this fear of leaning into the unknown, we can know that it's never been easier or safer or a better time to lean into the unknown. And in fact, like, I think that there is so much more magic and so much more expansion and growth that we can do by looking for places of unknown and just fully leaning into it. And then the more you do it and the more you realize it's not so scary, and the more you grow and become evolved as a person, the more you want to do it, the more you realize that
Yeah.
your identity isn't in this little capsule, but it's this
Right.
thing that you continually get to define and refine and grow. So I love the spaces of the unknown. I think that's the most exciting now, but it was
Yeah.
a place that I would never want to go to before. So we're in
Mm.
this beautiful world where we actually get to walk into the unknown and understand it and know it, and then go further, which is very exciting.
Hell yeah, brother. Thank you. For people who want to work with you, anybody who's got wants a book written or wants to follow you on social media, where do you send people? Where can we direct them?
Yeah, you can find me on socials, Miles Rote, MilesRote, or author.inc if you want to write and publish a book with us.
Fuck
But I
yeah.
appreciate you, brother. Appreciate the work that you're doing,
Thank you.
and for having me on. This has been great.
Thanks for being here. Cheers. Do you want to help support the podcast? I know you do. Perfect. Here's how. Please take 12 seconds, scroll down, slap us with a 5-star review, and share this episode with one person in your life. Think about this. You tip your bartender and he serves you poison. And all I'm doing is pouring soul stirring truth right into your ears. And if you haven't gotten a chance to grab one of my books, please get a hold of Today I Rise, snag a copy of Man Uncivilized, or get yourself some 28 Days in Darkness. Buy one for yourself, buy one for a friend, and buy one for your ex who's still watching your Instagram stories. I love you. Thank you. Until next time, stay uncivilized.